For years, Camilla operated in the shadows, never crowned queen by choice, but by cunning. While the public saw her smile within palace walls, she was drafting decrees that would shift the throne's center of power. But what was her real goal? And why did it involve Catherine? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Her story wasn't written in ink but whispered through corridors, sealed in envelopes marked with the sovereign's crest and passed along by those who believed power belonged not to blood, but to will. When King Charles fell ill, the monarchy entered what insiders would call its most fragile phase since the abdication crisis. Amid hushed concern and medical ambiguity, Camilla stepped in not with the crown, but with control. She didn't need to sit on the throne, she simply needed to write the rules. With Charles withdrawn from royal duties, it began quietly. A reshuffling of senior staff here, a reorganization of ceremonial roles there. Under the guise of continuity, Camilla began issuing internal mandates, formal yet carefully veiled from the public eye. She established new protocols, streamlined communication lines to the Prime Minister, and reduced William's presence at key meetings, citing rest and travel. But it was the appointment of Catherine that stunned even the closest aides. On parchment bearing the royal seal, Camilla declared the Princess of Wales the symbolic authority of domestic royal engagements. The public, unaware of the political powder keg beneath, cheered. What they didn't know was that Camilla's move was surgical. She placed Catherine in a role of visibility but stripped it of any true decision-making power. Behind palace doors, it was understood Catherine was to be the face, but not the force. William, often briefed after decisions were finalized, sensed the shift immediately. He wasn't just being excluded, he was being managed. And Catherine, loyal to both her husband and the monarchy, found herself suspended in a position she neither sought nor understood. The royal household itself began to fracture. Some advisors, veterans of the Elizabethan era, found Camilla's assertiveness distasteful, bordering on unconstitutional. Others, younger and more ambitious, aligned with her vision of a modernized monarchy, led by a queen who had waited long enough. Loyalty became currency. And in this new order, William was suddenly bankrupt. As pressure mounted, so did whispers about why Camilla had acted so quickly, and what she truly hoped to achieve. Some speculated she feared being sidelined entirely once Charles stepped back, that naming Catherine was less an honor and more a diversion. Others believed this was her ultimate checkmate, tying Catherine to her side while cornering William politically. But Catherine's elevation was not a gift, it was a trap. And William knew it. She didn't ask for power, but the scrolls bearing Camilla's royal seal declared otherwise. Catherine found herself thrust into a role crafted not for glory but for control. As the public cheered behind closed doors, she wept. When the proclamation arrived, hand-delivered by a stone-faced emissary of the crown, the words on the parchment held an unbearable weight. To the world, it was a royal elevation, an endorsement of grace, poise, and continuity. But to Catherine, it was a sentence. Camilla's decree named her as the symbolic authority of domestic royal engagements, a title that glittered with ceremonial gold, yet rang hollow in its substance. There were no meetings of consequence, no authority in council, only events to attend, ribbons to cut and scripts to follow. A queen in silhouette, a figurehead on stage. And when the cameras stopped rolling, she sat alone with the echo of applause that never quite reached her soul. In private, Catherine broke. The walls of Kensington Palace bore silent witness to a woman torn between duty and dignity. Her eyes, always composed for the world, now brimmed with confusion and betrayal. She had spent years mastering the tightrope walk of royal life, only to be pushed center stage in someone else's theatre. Camilla had dressed it as trust, but trust did not come with strings, and these strings were wrapped tight around her wrists. The spectacle of her new status played well with the press. Headlines lauded her grace, fashion, and natural evolution toward queenship. Photos of Catherine at children's hospitals and ribbon cuttings were splashed across front pages. But what the public couldn't see was the script written for her rehearsed lines, pre-approved appearances, all designed not by William, not even by Charles, but by an advisory board loyal to Camilla. The real decisions, the real power, remained locked behind closed doors. She was no longer allowed to enter. Inside the palace, the murmurs began. Veteran courtiers whispered of a puppet queen, a manufactured figure meant to distract the nation from the true consolidation of power. They noticed how William's calendar was curiously light. They saw how his name disappeared from agenda briefings. And they began to suspect the worst, that Catherine's appointment was not just a political maneuver, but a personal blow aimed directly at the future king. William did not speak publicly, but his actions betrayed his fury. His normally composed demeanor turned to cold silence during meetings with Camilla's loyal aides. He demanded full access to the advisory logs and communications that had led to Catherine's designation but was denied. And that was when his protective instincts hardened into resolve. This wasn't just an insult to him, it was an assault on the woman he loved and the future they were meant to build together. Behind her gentle exterior, Catherine began to sense the betrayal as well. The more she leaned into her role, the more she saw its emptiness. Her name was being used. Her presence was being leveraged. She was not a queen in waiting. She was a placeholder, a shield, a diversion. And slowly, quietly, she began to pull away. The smiles dimmed, the appearances shortened. She knew that the crown placed upon her had not been offered, it had been imposed. And just as Catherine adjusted her crown, William decided it was time to remove it. He watched the woman he loved be turned into a pawn. William, the heir apparent, had played obedient son long enough. But when the future queen was being used as leverage, the gloves came off. The transformation in William was quiet but absolute. He was no longer content with smiling for cameras and delivering carefully curated speeches. Something had shifted. The fire Diana once carried, the one buried beneath layers of protocol and diplomacy, had begun to smolder in her son. Every time he watched Catherine step onto a podium, delivering words written by someone else, standing under banners arranged by Camilla's council, he felt the rage twist deeper. And behind closed doors, he started gathering allies not from the public eye, but from the palace's underbelly, the disillusioned, the dismissed, the sidelined. Royal aides, secretaries, old guards who had served under the Queen Mother and had seen the erosion of tradition with their own eyes. These were the men and women who knew the system and how to dismantle it. What they revealed shook William. Embedded within the newly signed decrees was a slow restructuring of ceremonial power. Events, access, patronage. They were being realigned not toward William's future reign, but toward Camilla's lineage. Distant cousins and old allies of hers were being quietly reintroduced into the court. Titles once thought dormant were being whispered back into relevance. If left unchecked, the very architecture of the monarchy would bend not to bloodline but to strategy. Catherine, he realized, was only the beginning. Fueled by these revelations, William turned his attention to the legality of Camilla's decrees. What he found was a web of ambiguities, emergency clauses triggered under the pretext of Charles's health instability, and unprecedented use of dormant royal authority that hadn't been activated since wartime. It was legal, but barely. And it had been rushed through with almost no oversight. At the heart of this loophole was one man, King Charles. And yet, Charles remained silent. Eerily so, every attempt to bring the issue forward met with vague responses, deferments, or worse, Camilla speaking on his behalf. That silence haunted William. In private, his thoughts returned to memories of his mother. He remembered her frustration, her despair, the way she had tried to protect them from the cold machinery of the crown. Diana had warned him about manipulation dressed in tradition. And now, decades later, the very same patterns were repeating, only now he had the power to act. So, he began to undo what had been done quietly. He rescinded minor appointments, recalled patronages that had been shifted, and reorganized certain security protocols under the guise of efficiency. Every move calculated, every reversal done under ancient royal rights granted to the Prince of Wales. He wasn't waiting for permission anymore. He was asserting presence. But these maneuvers weren't enough. They were pressure points, not ruptures, and Camilla was still protected. But to truly dismantle Camilla's plan, William would have to face the one man keeping her shielded, his own father. Where was the king? As Camilla reigned in practice and William prepared for confrontation, Charles vanished from both sight and duty, illness or something darker. The disappearance began with a single missed engagement, then two, then a month passed with no public appearance, no photographs, no addresses. A statement was issued short, sanitized and vague. His Majesty is resting, under careful observation. But rest doesn't last this long, and observers began to whisper. Clarence House became a fortress of silence, guarded not only by security but by protocol. Even senior members of the royal family reported limited access. Charles, it seemed, had evaporated behind palace walls, and in his absence Camilla stepped forward not as consort, but as command. She took meetings, she issued statements, she oversaw ceremonial duties. Slowly, subtly, she became the voice of the crown without ever holding the crown herself. The whispers turned to murmurs in the corridors of power. Ghost monarch. Some began calling him a sovereign in name but absent in every sense. Within royal circles, theories took root like ivy. Was Charles gravely ill, or was he being silenced? Those closest to William began feeding him troubling signs. Internal communications from Clarence House were inconsistent. Medical memos shared with the press contradicted one another, first citing fatigue, then precautionary treatment, then silence altogether. Even Charles's longtime aides were being replaced or reassigned. One advisor, quietly dismissed, confided to William that Camilla's circle had taken control of every access point to the king. William, already suspicious, now grew cold with rage. His father, the monarch, was not just being sidelined, he was being disappeared. And Camilla's grip over the throne was no longer symbolic. She had assumed the operational power of the monarchy. All decisions now came from her chambers. Briefings that should have passed through William's office went through Camilla's private secretary instead. Even royal press officers had been instructed to vet their language through her team. Charles had not abdicated, but the throne no longer bore his weight. Behind the walls of Windsor, William tried to reach his father personally, directly, but calls were diverted, meetings postponed, letters unanswered. What should have been a father-son reckoning turned into a cold silence, and Catherine, still playing her imposed role, felt the temperature shift too. Camilla's influence was suffocating, absolute. There were no checks, no balances, and the Queen Consort's shadow was growing longer than the King's crown. William began to suspect something few dared to say aloud, that his father wasn't just sick, he was trapped. Not in body, but in circumstance. Surrounded by a carefully curated inner circle loyal to Camilla and committed to maintaining her reign by proxy, Charles had become a figurehead within his own monarchy. Every door to him had a gatekeeper, every message an interpreter, every decision a filter. It was a court within a court, and at the center sat a queen who had rewritten the rules. With Charles in shadows and Catherine in danger, William made his move not with ceremony, but with force. He walked into the royal chamber with a document that would shatter the hierarchy. With his signature, William reversed Camilla's decrees and challenged the Queen herself. What followed was a royal rupture unseen in generations. The document was older than the throne room it was brought into. Dusted off from archives few even remembered existed, it was rooted in a series of royal statutes dating back to the early 1700s, laws crafted to ensure the heir could override any regency-induced overreach during a monarch's incapacitation. William had studied every word, consulted every loyalist legal scholar, and waited for the precise moment to strike. This was no rebellion in the dark. This was a return to blood right. With Catherine watching in stunned silence and palace aides frozen mid-breath, he laid it down with the weight of generations. The seal cracked. The future changed. Camilla's decrees, every line that had positioned her as the acting axis of power, were undone in a single sweep. Publicly, the language was diplomatic. Privately, it was warfare. William reclaimed his constitutional role as the direct heir and assumed operational authority over the monarchy's internal functions. No longer was Catherine a symbolic authority. No longer did Camilla's shadow decide state presence or domestic engagements. William didn't just reverse the structure, he dismantled it. And behind that decisive move was a quiet fury that had been boiling since the moment Catherine had been used as a pawn. Royal legal advisors, some of whom had once been hand-picked by Charles himself, backed William's authority. They validated the move with stone-faced precision, citing the Prince of Wales' explicit constitutional mandate in the event of compromised royal leadership. And though Charles had not abdicated, the silence surrounding his health allowed just enough ambiguity for William's action to fall within the law. There was nothing Camilla could do legally, but emotionally, that was another story entirely. She didn't scream, she didn't plead, she snapped. In private chambers, her fury tore through marble halls. Trusted aides were dismissed in a flurry of rage. Those who had pledged allegiance to her whispered of mass resignations. Camilla called the move a betrayal of trust, but William's allies saw it as a restoration of lineage. For every loyalist Camilla lost, William gained another: the old guards, the traditionalists, the ones who had watched with growing discomfort as power shifted away from the bloodline. Now the balance was realigned. Catherine, for her part, stepped back gracefully. With the crown of pressure lifted from her shoulders, she resumed her quieter role as a mother, a supporter, a steady heartbeat behind the throne. And while the public believed her power had been reduced, those closest to her knew this was a quiet victory. She had never sought the spotlight. Now she was free to walk in the one that mattered most: her own. William's decisive act was not just about governance, it was about reclaiming his family. Within hours, palace press officers received anonymous leaks, carefully crafted, strategically placed. The story that hit front pages wasn't about conflict, it was about clarity. Tradition restored, the headlines read. Prince acts to protect monarchy. The messaging was clear: this was not a coup, this was course correction. And to a nation weary of scandal, it landed as a promise. By dawn, royal protocols had been rewritten, the palace's structure of authority redrawn. And Camilla, once seen as the iron hand behind the throne, was now cast as a figure stripped of silent power. Her name remained, her title stayed, but her influence, her quiet reign had been fractured. But Camilla was not defeated, merely unmasked. And her next move would plunge the palace into chaos. She didn't scream, she didn't flee, she vanished. For 2 weeks, Camilla was nowhere to be found. And then, from exile, the counterattack began, not with words, but with whispers. The palace fell into an unnatural stillness the moment Camilla disappeared. One moment she was everywhere, her shadow cast over every document, every decision. The next, she was gone. No public appearances, no briefings, no sightings. The official word from the palace was rest, but those who knew better recognized it for what it was: retreat, strategic, calculated, chilling, because Camilla didn't need to stand in front of cameras to wield power. She had learned long ago that the sharpest knives leave no blood on the blade. The first strike came not through confrontation, but corruption. Anonymous sources began leaking stories to the press, subtle at first, then sharper. Questions were raised about William's rashness, his emotional volatility, his obsession with protocol. Then came the stories about Catherine. Harmless leaks became malicious narratives. An old letter meant to be private was published in a tabloid, showing Catherine expressing doubt in her early royal role. Soon after, grainy photos surfaced from an off-duty trip with her children, taken without her knowledge. Nothing scandalous, but enough to chip away at her pristine public image. Enough to seed doubt. Behind the walls of power, Camilla's allies began reactivating. Retired nobles were suddenly vocal again. Conservative lords in the House of Lords quietly expressed concern over the legitimacy of recent royal restructuring. Meetings that were once symbolic turned into breeding grounds of discontent. There were murmurs of precedent, whispers of constitutional review. The goal wasn't to reverse William's actions immediately. It was to destabilize him, make him sweat, force him into mistakes, a long game of corrosion. And yet the most chilling move wasn't political, it was psychological. Rumors began to spread that Camilla had been meeting discreetly with representatives of foreign royal families, names like Monaco, Jordan, and even remnants of the Habsburg lineage surfaced. She was building something, or threatening to. A shadow alliance, a claim to tradition older than Britain's current royal structure itself. If she couldn't dominate the monarchy from inside, she would surround it from without. All of this unfolded while the Queen Mother's memory was being quietly rebranded. Speeches honoring her legacy began to frame her as a woman of unshakable independence and bold adaptability, terms that Camilla's allies then used to justify her modern regency. The very woman who had once despised her was now being used to strengthen her position. It was brutal. It was brilliant. William saw the pattern for what it was. He knew these weren't just attacks on his decisions. They were meant to unravel his very foundation. They were designed to provoke him, fracture his trust, isolate him from Catherine, from his advisors, from the public. But what Camilla hadn't anticipated was that William had changed. He was no longer the son lost in his father's shadow. He was the man forging a new monarchy, one decree at a time. While Camilla played chess in shadows, William prepared for war in daylight with one final gambit. It was never about Catherine. It was about the throne. In a private confrontation at Windsor, William accused Camilla of orchestrating a bloodless coup, and when Charles was wheeled into the room frail, but listening, it became a family trial. The walls of Windsor had seen centuries of royal conflict, but nothing quite like this. It wasn't a council meeting, nor a royal summit. This was raw, unfiltered confrontation, son against stepmother, legacy against manipulation. William, no longer hiding behind formality, laid it bare. He accused Camilla of hijacking the monarchy under the guise of duty, of weaponizing decrees and whispers to consolidate power in a time of weakness. Her silence in those early moments was not submission, it was calculation. When she finally spoke, the words came like venom wrapped in velvet. "You're not angry for the crown," Camilla said coldly. "You're angry because someone else knew what to do with it while you hesitated." She turned the knife with a name William never expected to hear, Diana. She claimed he was still haunted by his mother, still searching for her approval in every decision, still fighting the ghost of abandonment. "You needed a mother," she whispered. "And when you couldn't have one, you chose a wife to shield you from the throne." The words weren't just cruel, they were surgical, aimed to pierce not just his resolve, but his identity. And yet, William stood firm. He didn't yell. He didn't waver. He turned to Charles, finally present after months of evasions, his body weak but his eyes alert. "Did you know?" William asked. "Did you authorize any of this?" The room froze. For a moment, it seemed Charles would retreat behind royal ambiguity once again. But this time, he didn't. What he said next cracked the royal narrative wide open. "Yes," Charles admitted. He had signed over temporary authority, but under pressure. Medical staff had urged him to rest. Advisors, most of them loyal to Camilla, had brought him documents disguised as routine. He had not read every clause. He had not foreseen the outcome. But he did not stop it either. He confessed to being overwhelmed, fatigued, and, in his words, trusting the wrong people at the wrong time. There was no conspiracy from the king, only a collapse of will. And Camilla, seeing the gap, had stepped in without hesitation. But what turned this into a reckoning was the revelation that Camilla had acted beyond even what Charles had permitted. She had invoked emergency protocols meant only for wartime, restructured the household without formal approval, and manipulated legal advisors to bypass William altogether. It wasn't just power, it was premeditated usurpation wrapped in royal lace. The room became a courtroom without a judge, and William, standing before his father and stepmother, issued an ultimatum: restore order publicly, strip Camilla of her remaining operational authority, reinstate the original structure of succession and communication, or he would walk away. From everything, from the crown, from the institution, from the burden he had carried since he was a boy in black at his mother's funeral. The monarchy, he warned, could not survive another scandal, but neither could he. And then, in the eye of that storm, a voice spoke, calm, steady, unshaken. It was Catherine. She didn't plead, she didn't advise. She simply reminded them of what the public saw, what the people believed, and what the future demanded. Not control, not vengeance, but unity, clarity, and truth. The monarchy teetered, But Catherine's quiet courage turned the tide. She had been appointed, then discarded, but in the eyes of the people, she had never fallen. Catherine, the Duchess who endured power plays and betrayal, emerged not as ruler but as symbol. The storm had passed, but its echoes still lingered. In the aftermath of confrontation and exposed manipulation, something remarkable happened, something that no decree or headline could have predicted. The public, long conditioned to watch the royal family with weary skepticism, rose in quiet rebellion, not with protest signs or angry chants, but with unwavering support for the woman who had never asked to lead, yet bore the burden with dignity. Catherine, once cast as Camilla's ornamental shield, was now the emotional core of the monarchy. Flowers flooded palace gates. Letters arrived by the hundreds, many addressed not with titles, but with affection to Catherine, the queen of our hearts. And yet, even with the tide in her favor, she chose the opposite of power. She stepped back. She declined additional formal duties. In a rare and personal address, Catherine spoke not of victory, but of vulnerability. She acknowledged the pain, the pressure, the mistakes. She asked not for reverence, but for reflection. Her voice carried a simple message. The monarchy must remember it is meant to serve, not rule. Her speech, broadcast globally, was hailed as the most human moment the crown had seen in decades. No palatial backdrop, no golden throne, just truth. The media, once complicit in her public dissection, now rallied behind her. They named her the Reluctant Queen, a title that transcended protocol. She didn't need a crown. She had something rarer, trust. And in every photo that followed, she was never alone. Young Prince George, hand in hand with his mother, stood beside her at hospitals, memorials, and schools. He wasn't there for formality. He was there to be part of her healing. The imagery was unmistakable, the future standing beside the heart of the present. William, once embattled and cornered, found himself redefined through her. Together, they weren't monarchs in waiting, they were a symbol of balance, passion and restraint, strength and empathy. They were no longer heirs to a fractured dynasty. They were the soul attempting to mend it. But as the nation sighed in relief, one final twist lay dormant beneath the velvet cushions of a royal desk drawer. Weeks after the dust settled, a sealed letter was found bearing the royal seal and Charles's final words. Its contents? A decree that would unsettle the kingdom once again, and shake the very foundation of William's triumph. It was discovered tucked beneath a stack of unopened red boxes in the king's personal study, its edges worn, its wax seal intact. No fanfare accompanied its unsealing. No public announcement marked its emergence. But within its parchment lay a final blow, issued not in defiance, but in reflection. It was dated 3 months prior, during the height of Charles's withdrawal from public life, and it was addressed not to a person, but to the institution itself, to the monarchy, should it fracture. Inside, Charles laid out his deepest fears, not just as a monarch, but as a father. He praised William's resolve, his sense of duty, his instinct to protect the crown. But he questioned his son's restraint, his readiness for solitude, his ability to weather betrayal without retaliating. Leadership, Charles wrote, is not born from fire, but from stillness. The letter continued with a revelation that sent shivers through the core of royal tradition, the establishment of a shadow council, a closed body of advisors tasked with observing, moderating, and if necessary intervening in the future of succession. William's name was not listed among them. Instead, the names were old, obscure, some tied to noble families, with deep but silent roots in the monarchy's past. And at the heart of it all was Camilla, named not queen, not regent, but lifetime royal advisor to the crown and its moral balance. A title that had no legal precedent, but one that carried symbolic weight impossible to ignore. The ink was faded, but the intent was fresh, to haunt the halls of power long after Charles's reign was done. It was the final sentence, however, that would etch itself into the psyche of every palace corridor, every whispering aide, every advisor left behind. The crown is not given, it is watched, a phrase both cryptic and chilling. a warning or a promise. No one could be sure. The palace confirmed the letter's authenticity but refused to comment further. No retractions, no clarifications, just silence. And yet, the damage was done. Doubt returned like fog across the palace lawns. Was William's ascent secure? Was Camilla truly finished? Or had Charles, in his final act, ensured that the monarchy would never again be held by one hand alone? Catherine, as ever, said nothing. William, visibly shaken, chose not to respond. But those who studied the monarchy understood the future would not be decided by documents alone. It would be shaped by tension, by scrutiny, by the cold machinery of legacy grinding beneath the surface. The camera pans out. The monarchy is far from done. And so, in a kingdom built on ceremony and silence, the loudest wars are still waged in whispers. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.